Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Naomi. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I think it's special with everything that's going on. Obviously, this homecoming situation, and every time she comes to potential answers, all she does is reach a dead end. Naomi is so desperate to find some kind of answers, and obviously the only person who can give her those answers are Zimbardo, but he won't give them to her. Why he won't? Because he claims time and time again that she isn't ready. Because, I mean, this was, I guess, like, at the very least, they were hoping, probably everyone was hoping she'd be a little bit older when she found out the truth, but it's like, right, you're a teenager, you've only just found out about some of the truth about yourself, as she said, as Naomi even says, like a few weeks ago. So it's not like she's not even in the deep end yet, and it's hard to be thrown in the middle of a pool before you even learn how to properly swim. Even though she has Dee teaching her, but still. So, trying to find a secret that Zimbardo was trying to hide at the mill, they end up discovering a spaceship, potentially her spaceship. So, she ends up taking it to someone she thought would help her, Dr. Bell, who does seem like she has answers. She's like, yeah, I'm aware of, she's like, oh, you're a Superman fan. It's like, oh, do you know Superman? It's like, no, but I know some of his mutual friends, because it turns out she immediately recognized Naomi for what she was. I was like, are you an alien that can tell other aliens? It's like, no, she just has science that allows her to recognize the signatures of other people. I'm curious, who are these other mutual friends? Because I didn't realize it at the time, but later on Zimbardo was like, stay away from Dr. Bell, stay away from Star Labs. I'm like, wow, I guess Star Labs, well, I guess no matter what Earth, no matter what the circumstances, Star Labs is always going to be in the middle of something. So I wonder, that's interesting to know, kind of our insight into Star Labs is Dr. Bell, and that she's not the greatest person, it seems. She's just one of those people of just kind of scientific discovery is bigger than just one person. Sacrifices must be made. Because basically she wants, if she can because discovering more about aliens and humans, because they're all puzzle pieces to the universe. Now with a piece like Naomi, who is a puzzle piece to an even bigger element to it, the multiverse. I thought it was clearer to Naomi, but I guess not. I guess she just assumed her planet was Earth 29. I immediately was like, oh, Earth 29, you're from you're from a different, universe entirely. But then it's like, she's like, wait, I'm from a different, it's like, okay. Which is also interesting, because I don't know if any other show, the only shows that really have gone deep into the multiverse, obviously it's been a part of the Arrowverse stuff, but the only show that's really deep dived into it was The Flash. I don't know if they've ever really talked about the fact is that how basically the mathematics around it, well, the site, quote unquote science works around it, that it's cool, it basically using some world theory of basically all the planets are there are universes basically in the same time and slot, just in a different space, essentially. So, right in this exact spot where Earth is, there is a parallel Earth. Well, multiple parallel Earths. I always think it's interesting, the discussion about the multiverse, that basically it's a very thin layer. You go, something His Dark Materials, being able to kind of cut through the very, fabric, stuff like that, I thought was kind of very interesting using, God, I'm blanking on the knife's name now, but that knife, it's basically you can you can actually cut through space. It's a very thin line. You gotta get it just right, and you can cut right into it. I mean, that's what I think of is so interesting about the multiverse. I think the multiverse is that, these little thin lines that it's in, people can't perceive at all, but these thin lines, if you were to cut over into it and you cut into a little bit of the barriers are there, they're just tiny barriers that just layered upon layers of just different universes stacked so close together. I think it's such a fascinating concept, the way of somewhat visualizing the multiverse. I think is such an interesting thing. Obviously, you see it on a much larger scale, even the model that Dr. Bell has, but I like the notion of it's just a thin layer that, that thin layer is time and space, but still knowing you just slice through it and there's another universe is just, to me, the dope is representation of that concept. we also discovered a little bit more about Naomi in the regard of her powers. It's like every time you turn around, I wonder, once again, I don't have a full understanding of what her powers exactly are. It is like energy based, but I can't quite tell like how that leads to her essentially having X-ray vision, which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't expect that. So it's like, right, you're going to have like a laundry list of superpowers. I mean, I guess in my head, I always, like, let's take the Flash, for example. The Flash has a whole bunch of powers, which, yes, it's science fiction, but the justification is he's able to run so fast, build up like electricity. Like, I can justify like everything that Barry can do, or just any speedster in general can do, is a laundry list of things under speed. Super speed is the main thing, and then everything else is kind of a check mark under that super speed. Superman's got a laundry list of abilities: flight, heat vision, super breath, maybe an eidetic memory. That depends, I guess, on the continuity. Superhuman strength, all that. So it's like, I'm wondering, like, it's our powers more like Barry's, where it's like, oh, she has this energy power and everything else is under that, or is she more like Superman, where it's like, no, you have like a laundry list of powers that aren't necessarily connected. Like Barry's, I'm sure, kind of like, maybe their power, like, and I'm basing that mainly on the TV show, because I feel like every ability Barry has in the show is like I said, a byproduct of specifically his speed. It's not like a separate power. You know, his abilities and what he's able to do is because of his speed allowing him to do it. So I'm curious, like, even her X-ray vision, is that a byproduct of like her energy control and stuff? Which Dr. Bell did present something that it seemed like a certain frequency, as she calls it, the resonance, which basically made it so that Naomi could use her powers and have better control. You do notice though, like, she did kind of do a dick move that I was like, that's a little, that she like turned it up, and she's like, yeah, see, it's like, that was kind of a dick move. Like, you raised it up a certain point because you wanted to see what her threshold would be before like it became too much for her. So I guess she was planning stuff even back then. But it's like, yeah, she's also the one connected to those. Well, she got those crystals and stuff like after everything that went down last episode. So either she found her own stash of it a while back and just recently acquired it, or those are those very same ones from Shadow Ridge from last episode that she heard about and acquired. So it makes you wonder, does a lot of people like avoid her? Like she said, like I said, she doesn't know Superman, but she knows some of his associates. I'm curious, is Dee aware of her? Because Zumbato definitely is, because he stole a device from her. Which, Zumbato, this episode kind of made you had more of an eye-opening thing about him, because, well, for one, he broke into their house and told Naomi's parents, like, you need to leave with Naomi. They're like, why don't you leave? He's like, yeah, I could, but it wouldn't change anything. Like, they know where Naomi is now. Like, she's basically a giant beacon now, and you and neither her will be safe. Even he makes it clear, like, no, this is also about self-preservation too. I need to survive, and I'm not about to get caught up in all of this because of Naomi. Yes, she's a necessary piece, but I need her out there active, because he needs her to grow. He needs her to be stronger. He needs her out there and ready for what is coming. Even saying that there is a threat, he's like, I already know the military is investigating people like me. Obviously, your parents don't know that, right? The military is also onto them, because they're like, cool, we know you're hiding something, so it's only a matter of time before they come at the door knocking for Naomi, or at least being suspicious of, maybe they start putting some timelines together, like, oh, you happen to adopt your daughter around this time and stuff. So, which, speaking of, like, I brought it up before, and it definitely does still feel like there is more to her story they're not telling her, because they don't think she's ready either, but I don't know. Well, because Annabelle had brought it up. It's like, cool, your parents found you on a rock, but why is it that you have a spaceship then? Like, someone had to have placed her there, and once again, or maybe it's just her parents aren't telling her everything, or maybe they are, I don't know. Just hard to say who's telling everything and who isn't. I feel like Dee's been pretty honest. I don't think he's necessarily hidden anything from her. He's probably like, obviously, he hasn't really talked about himself, that's about it, but anything related to her, he's been pretty honest, unlike the other people in her life, so. But circling back really quickly, Luckily, I almost thought I was like, wow, that's an unfortunate situation to be in because no one knows she went to Dr. Bell's. So when Dr. Bell's like draining her energy and stuff, and Zambado luckily shows up to help, he's like, I'm sorry, I should have told you the truth. And they kind of glare at each other because he even said that device that she was making, he was like, it's dangerous to our planet. But it's like, Naomi can't trust him. It's like, right, you're a bad guy. Everyone's told me to stay away from you. Obviously, Dee hasn't referenced the fact is that him and Zambado worked together last episode. To be fair, it's not like, oh, we're best buds or anything now. It's like, no, it was a mutual beneficial situation. So they both ended up getting something out of it. He got the check, the bounty list, just like Dee did. I wonder if we're going to find out he's related to her or something like that. I was like, do you think it's going to be a thing of like, Naomi, I am your father? I'm probably butchering that. Once again, apparently most people get that quote wrong. I can never remember what the actual quote is. Because it's not, Luke, I'm your father. It's actually not. It's just been in the pop zeitgeist, probably, except unless you're a super Star Wars sweaty, you probably wouldn't get that right. I've been saying it wrong my entire life. Regardless, I'm wondering, is he going to be revealed that he's her father, or he has some deeper connection to her? The way he talks about it seems like there is no connection between them aside from them being from the same planet. But obviously, Akira was like, yeah, he's the reason why. But it's once again, it's you don't know anything, because in his mind, it's probably yeah, I might have done something, but it was for the greater good. I might have done something, but I was trying to save my world, and I made a mistake. Maybe I trusted the wrong person. I don't know. Just like Dee. Well, Dee's a lot less of an enigma now, because at the very least, I have some inkling of Dee because of revealing that he was a Thanagarian. I'm like, oh, I have a better understanding of you just because of my limited experience with the Thanagarians. Zambado, I'm like, I have no idea what you are, who you are, what you're all about, Because he is the biggest enigma amongst everyone. So, but the fact is, he went out of his way to say Naomi, which is the argument could be, well, she is necessary. Because I also they ended up tussling for a little bit, because he was also making a point of ignorance is different from immaturity. And he's like, after seeing you time and time again, you've proven that you aren't ready. Even going as far as saying oh, you're a disappointment. That almost felt like oh, you're a disappointment, almost like some kind of tough love from a parent type of twisted tough love from a parent type of thing. But then I'm also he's probably no, she's probably supposed to be the golden child. It's you're the chosen one type of thing. Maybe that's kind of what that's about. But him going above and beyond to save her is just interesting. But my point was, Dee had brought up the conversation early on that you need to learn these skills, how to fight, because you might come across an opponent yeah, you might have your powers, but you'll come across an opponent who has power and skill. And she's even yeah, but what about Superman? It's yeah, and he's definitely met his match, because his powers aren't overwhelming when it comes to other bad guys. I mean, I guess it just depends on the circumstances, but Darkseid can give him a run for his money. Let's not forget who's the first person to ever kill him in the comics, who's at least been a byproduct of doing it in other continuities, but, Doomsday gives him a run for his money. And I think it is neat that element comes back immediately in this episode when she went up against Zambado. It's yeah, you might have your powers, but he has the skill to, without even having to try. The entire time, he didn't even really fully fight back. He just used his powers to deflect yours. That's the rub of it all. He didn't even have to try. He's oh, deflect this, deflect that. Oh, you hit me full blast? Oop, let me deflect it back at you. It's he just countered you in every move. So it's yeah. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us with this. Maybe her parents would have been better off, because they don't want to make Zambado seem like a good guy, because they know he probably has his ulterior motives, which he does. He doesn't hide that necessarily, but maybe they would have been better off telling Naomi yeah, he came here to visit. He didn't visit. He broke in saying yo, telling us to leave town, and this experience might just kind of put the nail in the coffin for that, especially if Dr. Bell she knows about Naomi now, and knows oh, McDuffie, all I have to do is track down that name and I can get what I want. I mean, she might even try working with the military because it's like, cool, you do this for me, I get her for my it might be one of those kind of nasty situations. So but other than that, as I brought up earlier, D, he goes off this episode to look for Koala, and he goes and meets with Adam at a bar where it's like, yeah, everyone who finds their way to this planet ends up coming here. It's kind of like a get-together spot, which I guess I'm wondering, is it supposed to be a little resemblant of kind of like that bar in Supergirl that like all the aliens kind of gathered in. Well, he ends up meeting a guy named Lux, and he's asking him for information about Koala. Because it was interesting, too, because, we looked a little more insight into D, where it's like, both him and Koala, like, had been through so many battles. Like, the Thanagarians are, like, once again, the general consensus seems to be, most people are like, yeah, the Thanagarians are all about war. You justify it here and there, but it's like, man, you guys love war. You love war. You're warriors, you're fighters. And D talked about that him and Koala didn't want that anymore. It's like, we found ourselves on another planet fighting another war, and just, we were done with it. So they decided they found Earth, they found this town, and they were supposed to meet here, but they came separately so they wouldn't be found. Because they're people, because like Adam's like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, I've never met a love-struck Thanagarian before. And he's like, yeah, because it's frowned upon by his people, because they're supposed to be warriors, and love, like, feelings, emotions, and like that, make you weak. So it's all about, shutting that off and just being a strong warrior. But that life isn't what they wanted anymore. So they planned to come here, but she never arrived. And the question then becomes like, well, first you're like, could there people, well, he did go back to Thanagar, I said Thanagaria, went back to, Thangar, like, a couple years ago, right? Like, that came up before, because he was probably wondering the same thing, like, did our people track her down and capture her? So he never really talked about much about that trip, I don't think. But the guy Lux has her ring around his neck, and it's like, he says they found themselves caught up in another war on another planet, and she ended up dying, and he took it from her. It's not like, oh, she gave it to him. It's like, no, he took it from her dead body, being like, yeah, I didn't want to take the chance that, it was a reminder that that could have been me. It's like, that's such a selfish and douchebag reason to do that. So, and now he knows, like, because even Adam's like, yeah, maybe Lux is lying, but D is like, no, he's not. And it's like, that's the thing of, like, he said not knowing was the worst, and it's like, who knows if it is? That's always the rub of it all. Like, sometimes your imagination could get the worst of you when you think, your imagination can be a lot worse than reality, but then it doesn't make, when reality finally strikes, it doesn't make it any better. It doesn't make it any easier. So I thought that bar fight was pretty dope. I even love it being like, hey, human skills only, which is like once again that element of, yeah, sometimes you won't be able to rely on your powers. Doesn't matter. Adam and D wrecked shop anyway. I also love that aspect of the dude punching and like D just like beating the dude's fist with his forehead. Also, that takedown was pretty dope, especially with like the camera spin to him. Like, that was pretty sick. Ended up taking the ring, and by the time he gets back home, he ends up kind of putting it away with his ring, because it's just like, right, he's been holding out for hope for so long about all of that. So we'll find out whether that's really the full story to all of that, but maybe Lux thought she was dead, but maybe he never actually bothered checking, or maybe she actually is. Who knows? Maybe this story is open and shut, or maybe there is still some wiggle room for more for it. I don't know. I'm curious to see. But another interesting aspect to this episode is the whole Nathan and Anthony thing. Yeah, they still have their issues. Obviously, there's a little competition between everyone about, like, cool, like, you can win a trophy or whatever for whatever, like, club or whatever does the best. So and everyone's competing, and then Anthony's like thing gets trashed, and he immediately blames Nathan. Nathan's like, yo, I told you this thing was stupid, but I didn't do it. He's like, yeah, of course you did. Like, no one else would do it. He's like, there are plenty of other military kids here. He's like, yeah, but only one military kid, you, has beef with me. So they had their back and forth. I even love it, like, you know, it's like, oh, is this about Naomi? And Anthony is like, no, but while we're on the subject, you're not good enough for him. It's like, do you think you are? Because he's just like, and I love that it's like, yeah, because it came up at the beginning and we just haven't never circled back to it, but it's the underlining thing of like, right, like, it's like some of the townspeople kind of get pushed aside because of the military, but also it does work vice versa. It's like, not like Anthony was the warmest, but he'll try to justify it by being like, oh, like, because he'll say like, you know, it started because of Nathan. Like, Nathan actually kind of made it seem like it started with Anthony, because he's like, do you remember my first day here? He's like, no, I actually don't. He's like, my first day here, you were supposed to show me around and you left me, like, you just kind of like dropped me and left me like after third period. And he was like, well, the fact is you weren't nice to me. You gave me the wrong address to your party. And it's like, you know, so either like that was an accident or it legitimately was just, it probably wasn't an accident. Probably it's like, it's kind of a tit for tat type of thing. And it's just like, it's like, but the thing is, he was like, you don't know me. He's like, yeah, but I know your type. He's like, I know other military brats. And that's the thing. He has his prejudice because he feels like his town's history is being erased. Because like, people come here, you're like, you're not staying here. You're just passing through. And every time more and more military people come here, you're erasing history and stuff like that. And he was like, so you don't think I know about someone erasing my history? And Anthony got super quiet because he was like, you won't right into that, bro. And it's like, yikes. But Anthony's also like, yeah, but you don't know me either. And that's the problem. Neither one of them took the time to really get to know each other. They came in with their own biases because, you know, Nathan was like, oh, this dude hates military kids. Screw him. Because, once again, most times when he would talk about Anthony, he'd be like, oh, townie. And then Anthony just had his own bias about military people. He just thought he knew up and down who Nathan was. But actually spending time with him when they actually were able to break into, like, the security lab, where the computers which have all the security stuff is at, like, he's working on stuff. And even at that point, Anthony's like, so did it ever suck moving all around all the time? He's like, sometimes it did, you know, because Anthony also probably can't think of that. Like, not only himself, but probably his family's been here for generations. So, you know, and even like Naomi and, it might have even been her and Annabelle, it might have been her and Nathan that had that conversation about being able to call one spot your home and knowing, you know, I lived in a town for most of my life. I lived in my hometown for like 19-ish years, you know? So, but it's not the same as like, yeah, this is a place you put down roots for generations type of thing. But, I think it made Anthony kind of reevaluate things, kind of being like, right, I guess I don't know you. Like, we haven't really ever taken the time to really get to know each other. Because it's like, yeah, like, the fact is that Nathan didn't always have the easiest time making friends, just like Naomi didn't. Because he's like, yeah, back in Seoul, he's like, I didn't really have many friends, so, like, he'd spend a lot of time, like, working on, like, computers and stuff like that. So that's why he knows how to do all this stuff looking through the security camera. I was actually surprised when we found out who it was, and it ends up being Esme. I was like, oh, that's weird. Why is that? And then you see the thing with her dad. He was like, oh, like, aren't you going to get first prize? She's like, yeah, but you promised. He's like, yeah, but I'm not going to take a pie to the face for nothing. It's like, it's the most simplest thing. Like, oh, I'm going to take a pie. But it's like, no. Like, just the simplest thing for your daughter. Like, oh, you promised you take this pie to the face. It'd be fun, Dad. And he's like, no, unless you win and get first place. Because apparently, like, he won, like, all 4 years he was at high school or something like that. I think is kind of what Esme was getting at. And so, Anthony and Nathan don't say anything to her. They're just like, oh, can we get a pie? Because I think they realize, like, oh, man, because she is kind of a little bit of a perfectionist. She tries so hard, but it's like, oh, like, her home life's not, like, she's under a lot of pressure to just, like, try and meet her father's pretty high standards. Now, is he a complete and utter dick in that moment? Kinda, but it's on the mild end of dickishness, but we don't know how far beyond that stretch. It's like, oh, yeah, this is just a pie situation, but it's like, right, she's trying to remove the competition. It's like, all right, you feel the need, like, this matters so much to you because it matters so much to your dad. Like, for whatever reason, you know, so I think they're kind of letting it, it's like, oh, they never reported or anything. They were just like, oh, we'll help you out. She's like, really? Thanks. You know, so I don't know. She probably hasn't figured out that they figured it out, but they probably won't say anything. They just, you know, because I think it is a thing of like, right, they learned how to be a little more understanding towards each other. So rather than immediately pointing a finger, getting her in trouble, like, let's try and be a little more sympathetic to her situation as well. So just thought that was interesting. Little personal growth on their part. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.